Thanks to the IFPMA for giving me this opportunity, and thanks to Charles River Associates for this report, which I think is, as my fellow discussants have said, is a very timely contribution to this issue. And I think for me there are three key messages that I would take out of the report. One is a sense of progress that we've seen over the last 10 years, which is actually quite remarkable. Regardless of what CD4 count level you want to take, we've come from a situation where perhaps 1 in 1,000 people who needed treatment were getting it, to somewhere around half of the people needing it, receiving it. So huge progress. I don't underestimate that there's still much more to be done, both in terms of getting access to existing medicines and in terms of R&D to the future. But I think the first key message that there is real progress. The second key message for me is around the political will that has driven that progress. And I would very much agree with Mariangela about the role of civil society and NGOs in terms of fostering that political will. But it's not just political will in governments, it's political will in all stakeholders that are engaged in this fight against HIV/AIDS is necessary. So it's just as much the leadership within an organisation like mine at GlaxoSmithKline needs to be fully supportive of the fight against HIV as it is at the government level, at the WHO level, at the NGO level. So for me, political will is about leadership within every organisation that's active in this fight, not just at the governmental level. And the third thing that comes out to me is, to take Daphne's point of speaking about what she knows about, I also speak obviously from the prism, looking through the prism of someone who's worked in the industry over the last 10 years. But the third key message that comes out to me is the way that the industry has changed over the last 10 years and how different we look and individual companies look compared to the positions that were being taken 10 years ago. And I'd like to talk just very briefly a bit about some of those changes that we've seen, some of which are captured in the report. But in terms of the R&D, I think it's remarkable to see the amount of research and development that has gone on over the last 10 years or so, and certainly since the late 80s. Given the intense scrutiny in this area, and the challenges that the industry have faced, the fact that we've continued to invest in R&D to develop new products for existing patients and continue to invest in R&D for patients for the future, I think is a very important contribution. There's still more to be done there. We need to make sure that we've got the right sort of pediatric products, and to Mariangela's point, we need to make sure that we've got the products which are suitable for the state of the epidemic in developing countries. And we need to therefore get the balance right between the need to incentivize that R&D and the pressures on price. But I think we're in a much more constructive environment in which to achieve that balance. The second area after R&D is around pricing and affordability, what companies have done to try and make their products more affordable. That's both in terms of reducing their prices, but also advocating for more resources going into this area. There's also initiatives around, like voluntary licensing. The company GSK now operates all of its HIV operations through a joint venture with Pfizer called ViiV Healthcare. But ViiV has adopted and extended actually the voluntary licensing policies that GSK had, whereby all of ViiV's antiretrovirals, both now and in the future, they've committed to make those available as voluntary licenses to any companies who want to supply all the sub-Saharan Africa, all the least developed countries and all the low-income countries. That covers 80% of everybody living with HIV. And what we've seen actually in the latest data from last year is that ViiV supplied around 2 million tablets of its versions of Epivir and Combivir, its biggest selling product, to developing countries in 2010, so 2 million tablets. But the 11 licensees that ViiV have supplied 594 million tablets of those two products. So it just shows you how that voluntary licensing approach has had a massive impact in terms of expanding access, and has demonstrated how you can actually improve access significantly within the current IP environment. And there's stuff that's covered in the report around the partnerships approach that the industry has engaged in, and we know how important that's been in Botswana. My company's own positive action program has had a significant impact in terms of specifically tackling some of the stigma and discrimination issues that have been addressed before. So I think we're in a position now, compared to 10 years ago, where there's a much greater recognition that the approach to tackling HIVs needs to reflect the societies in which we operate. And in the societies in which we operate, there are three key segments. There's the government, in which I include the WHO and UNAIDS and other multilateral agencies like that. There's civil society and NGO groups who both challenge the status quo but also provide a safety net often in terms of healthcare. And there's the private sector, whether that be the pharmaceutical industry or other elements of the private sector. So I think there's a much more recognition now that we need for those three groups to work together effectively if we're going to address the ongoing challenge of HIV, but also the other healthcare challenges that exist in developing countries. And the other thing which I think has changed is that that is now reflected in the industry and society generally taking a more systemic approach to some of these challenges. So HIV is a unique situation. We've heard how researched it is, and some of the mechanisms that have been used to tackle HIV might not have the same applicability in other disease areas. But certainly I think we are looking at more horizontal approaches rather than vertical approaches. We are being much more open as an industry about talking about technology transfer. The IFPMA has produced a very good document which helps to describe what the key criteria are that will encourage technology transfer. There's much more talk about the industry's role in health systems strengthening generally, and at the NCD summit last week there was an announcement that GSK was part of in terms of broadening out private sector's contribution to community health workers and to meeting the call for 1 million more frontline health workers. So I'll finish on that. I'll just sort of repeat the sort of three key messages that I started off with, which, and thanking the report authors again for pulling these out. It is about the progress. It is about the political will amongst all political will and leadership that's required amongst all organisations operating in this area, and the fact that the industry is looking very different now, and I think that that stands us in good place to continue in the fight against HIV, but also other healthcare challenges in the developing world. Thank you.